Uncle Scooby? Hi, I'm Scrappy-Doo.
Most franchise characters usually disappear because of a lawsuit or some kind of behind-the-scenes disaster. But when it comes to Scrappy-Doo, things are a little different. He was created to be loved, and he succeeded so hard that the entire Scooby-Doo franchise turned on him on purpose for over 4 decades. The two guys who put him in a live-action movie said they did it because they genuinely hated him. So this story is about a character getting erased intentionally. Today we'll be answering why an entire multi-generational franchise decided collectively that this character was worth wiping away completely.
Scooby, Scrappy-Doo, Scooby.
The ratings crisis that created him. To understand what happened to Scrappy and why he was wiped out of existence so intentionally, we have to understand why Scrappy-Doo even came to be. And to understand that, we have to go back to 1979. The original Scooby-Doo Where Are You formula was starting to get really boring because it was run into the ground with multiple spin-offs and format changes. The ratings were declining fast, and on top of that, Fred Silverman, you know, the ABC executive who had personally championed Scooby-Doo since its inception, had already jumped ship to run NBC. So with their biggest internal advocate gone and their numbers taking a hit, Hanna-Barbera was staring down the real possibility that ABC would just have to cancel the franchise completely in favor of a competing pitch. And this is where the full format overhaul comes in as a fix. The show got completely rebranded as Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, and the hook was completely new. You have Scrappy, Scooby's hyperactive, pint-sized nephew, who was introduced to shock some energy into the tired show. Scrappy made his debut on December 22nd, 1979, in the episode The Scarab Lives. Now, this whole thing was an unusual move for the era. Hanna-Barbera was adding a new character and restructuring the entire format of a nearly decade-old show. So even from day one, the character was treated as a fix and not like a character who was properly fleshed out. The show just couldn't decide what they wanted as his backstory because early episodes just have him show up already knowing the gang, even though he had never been mentioned before, even in passing. And then in the 1980s, we get an episode called Scrappy's Birthday, where we learn about his birth. When I tell you that everything about Scrappy-Doo was very much let's make it up as we go, I mean it. And the voice acting for this character matched that disposable energy. Lenny Weinrib voiced Scrappy for that first season, and then in 1980, he was replaced by Don Messick, who also voiced Scooby. Because this character was a patch created to solve a specific problem, they just went for the easiest route in all cases.
Okay, so I made a mistake. I'm a puppy. You want directions? Get a pointer.
Puppy power takes over. Scrappy's golden era. Whatever the intent was, the gamble paid off. The ratings climbed, and Hanna-Barbera leaned all the way in. Scrappy anchored Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo through its 1980 to 1982 run of shorts, which popped up in segments of the Richie Rich Scooby-Doo show, and he even got his own showcase with the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show from 1983 to 1984. This was his golden era. He took over the entire brand, but because of that, Velma, Fred, and Daphne, you know, the ones who did the mystery solving, yeah, they got pushed aside to make space for Shaggy, Scrappy, and Scooby. Longtime viewers who would tune in for the Trap and Unmask formula would turn on the TV and see a show that barely resembled the show they loved. So if you ever wondered why people have so much resentment towards Scrappy, this is why. Scrappy is the guy who took over the franchise, and for a few years, it was the truth, and that redefined his reputation for the next 40 years. They pushed Scrappy into the consumers' faces so much that he got his own line of toys, lunchboxes, and comic tie-ins. He was even working into crossover material alongside other Hanna-Barbera properties well outside the Scooby-Doo realm. He was the studio mascot, and given how popular he was as a character, his collapse also seems very insane. when the backlash turned vicious. The overexposure aged really badly. What worked to make the ratings better in 1979 ruined the fan excitement for the show, and by the time we hit the mid-80s, Scrappy became a character who was blamed for its creative decline. Scrappy is now the go-to example whenever pop culture retrospectives want to talk about a franchise chasing ratings by shoving in a new mascot. He shows up constantly in most hated cartoon character lists, decades after his actual heyday ended. And this irony is just the chef's kiss, because he was built to be this underdog, but the exact audience he was engineered to win turned on him. The slow fade. Phase out and written out. By the end of the 1984-85 season, Scrappy's run as a lead was quietly winding down. His last heroic outing came in the 1988 telefilm Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, where he plays a fairly standard supporting role, helping Scooby and Googie get Shaggy, newly turned into a werewolf by Dracula, through a monster road race. It's a far cry from the character who'd once carried an entire show on his own. After that, he essentially vanished from new material for over 2 decades, surviving only in reruns and the occasional comic strip. And then, when the franchise finally did bring him back, he was brought back as a joke. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated from 2010 has a scene where Fred and Daphne wander through the Crystal Cove Spook Museum on a date, and Daphne spots a statue of Scrappy sitting in the Rogues Gallery display alongside actual villains the gang has fought. Before she can even finish reacting, Fred cuts her off, reminding her that they swore never to speak of him again, before steering her away from the exhibit entirely. Then you have the 2019 Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost, when a returning character casually mentions a past adventure with Scrappy, and Velma responds by asking what a Scrappy is. The franchise at this point is gaslighting its own continuity on screen, treating a 40-year-old character as something that had never existed. Even when there were attempts to bring him back, they were met with resistance. Fan reporting around Be Cool Scooby-Doo claimed that a writer said Scrappy was in an early draft of a Halloween episode, but then he got cut because the team couldn't service him properly, which is code speak for someone inside the franchise wanted to use him, but he was written out. The 2002 villain twist that sealed his fate. The in-show jokes were a slow bleed. Then came the 2002 live action, which was like an execution. Unlike a lot of the "we made this choice for storytelling reasons" DVD commentary spin, people behind this movie have been very blunt about why they did what they did. Screenwriter James Gunn, years before Guardians of the Galaxy, came out of the woodwork and stated on Twitter why he made Scrappy the villain. Because Scrappy is just a completely f***ing awful person, is what he posted on Twitter. Later, when he was asked in an interview, he said, "He's a little piece of shit. I have had a few little kids who were very, very upset though. Sorry, kids?" And then in the run-up to the film's release, when a Fanboy Planet interviewer asked him to confirm that Scrappy wouldn't appear in the movie, Gunn dodged the question and said, "I can tell you I hate the little mother F word with all my heart and soul." Yikes. Director Raja Gosnell also said the same thing when asked. When he was speaking to E! Online about the film's making, he described the villain twist as a direct response to a character he felt had damaged the show he grew up on. He said, "Scrappy ruined the series. It just seemed like the moment Scrappy came on, we were out." He also described the moment the idea actually landed, mid-brainstorm, with Gunn saying, "So it was just a brainstorm between James and I where we were trying to figure out the final twist. Just out of the session, it was like, effing Scrappy. Like, yes." And say what you want, but the plot mechanics actually kind of work. Scrappy is revealed to have been kicked out of Mystery Inc. years before the film even begins. So he spends most of the movie disguised as Emil Mondavarius, the owner of the island, played by Rowan Atkinson, before revealing himself and transforming into a monstrous form that fans call Scrappy Rex, voiced by J.P. Manu. Eventually, he's defeated, and the souls are freed when the real Mondavarius is rescued. We get this flashback scene where it's revealed why he was cut from the gang in the first place. And well, it turns out he peed on Daphne and planned an internal coup. So yeah, Scrappy is the villain, and there is no doubt about it. Now, once the movie came out, the reaction to this twist was interesting, to say the least. For longtime viewers who watched Scrappy tank the show's reputation firsthand, it felt like this was a catharsis that was long overdue. But for younger fans who grew up watching Scrappy-Doo, it felt like an unnecessary take on their favorite character. Gosnell spoke about this in an interview, noting that there was a real backlash from the younger fans who had grown up liking the character, even though he felt the film's reception broke in the twist's favor. He said, "But enough people hated Scrappy, so we were mostly applauded. But if you're one of those people whose first introduction to Scrappy was this movie, then you probably see him as one of those punchline villains with no context for who he was meant to be. I would call it accidental, but I think this is what James Gunn and Roger Gosnell were going for. This was, after all, a personal vendetta." Cameos, jokes, and a dark HBO reinvention. After 2002, Scrappy didn't get any real starring role because that movie just changed him completely. In a 2018 episode, Scrappy shows up in a background gag as the #1 entry on a bad cartoon character's bulletin board, and the joke implies he didn't take it well. The Jellystone used him for a quick missing dog joke on a milk carton, and as per fan tracking site Scooby Snacks, a 2025 episode reportedly gave him a brief physical cameo as a rival school kid. But that's just fan-confirmed, not officially confirmed. So overall, you can tell that Scrappy doesn't get any more love. Then the biggest swing was HBO Max's Velma. In the second season that came out in 2024, Scrappy was reinvented as a product of this failed military bioweapon program, voiced by Jason Mantzoukas, connected to Season 1's Project Scooby. Once the program was decommissioned, as one recap put it, the military kept Edna's work and made Scrappy into a warped doggy monster. In the show, he becomes the season's serial killer before the finale ends, with him fighting with Velma on a balcony. A fight that she doesn't survive. This is important to consider because, remember, when Velma was coming out, it had to be one of the most hostile fan and critic receptions of any recent animated series, well before Scrappy even entered the picture. So when Season 2 killed off the title character using Scrappy-Doo, a chunk of the audience treated it less like a shocking twist and more like a reward. One review described the finale as the show going for the jugular by having Velma die while fending off a rabid Scrappy-Doo, framing the season as the writers daring the audience, "Oh, you detest Kaling's version of an iconic character? Look at what we're going to do to her next." And in a way, it is fitting because you have the most hated dog in cartoon history reinvented as a monster, taking down the protagonist that a large chunk of the show's own audience hated. Finally, something working out in Scrappy's favor because he wasn't the most hated person on screen. Could Scrappy ever come back? There are a few small scattered signals that he isn't permanently frozen out, because the longtime Scrappy voice actor Scott Innes recorded new lines for an undisclosed project in late 2024, which is yet to be confirmed by any studio. But hey, a rumor's better than nothing, right? Cartoon Network also briefly ran the series of his original 1980s show in early 2025, putting him back in front of an audience for the first time in years, even if it wasn't a comeback in any real sense. We still have no actual commitment for Scrappy, and he's noticeably absent from Velma-adjacent and Mystery Inc. nostalgia pushes elsewhere in the franchise, the kind of project that would otherwise be happy to mine deep cuts from Scooby-Doo history. Plus, you have to keep in mind what Scrappy would even look like now, because he's been reinvented so many times. Do we get the earnest and grating 1980s version? Or do we get the 2002 monster villain version, since most viewers under 40 know that one? Or do we push him further into horror territory like Velma did, because that's the most recent take on the character? Well, to be honest, maybe eventually we could do something with the character by, actually putting time and effort behind the character, but nobody's actually building towards that. He'll either get a quiet phase out with no fanfare, or he'll get an eventual glow-up where a new creative team will try to win the audience back over with a new take on him. Scrappy has neither for now.
Let's finish this puppy now!
Legacy, the most hated dog in cartoon history. For a character that's hated, Scrappy is not allowed to be forgotten. He is now a common joke in the entire storyline. The entire franchise has worked extra hard to make Scrappy a punchline, and this also kind of doubles down as a cautionary tale about a franchise's management, because, you see, Scrappy was invented to solve a ratings problem, but he did so well that he pushed the main cast to the side, getting on everyone's nerves until he became a hated character. Compare that to how franchises that are as old as Scooby-Doo usually treat a mascot who overstays their welcome. Usually, most get rotated out or brought back once for a nostalgia pop, but otherwise, they're left alone. Scrappy, on the other hand, gets treated like trash through and through. He is a hated character, yes, but he has managed to stay in the loop, still be a part of the conversation, and get used by writer. This level of sustained creative attention is an achievement in itself. Unlike most of the characters we've talked about on our channel, Scrappy-Doo manages to remain relevant even if it's from the sheer level of hate. Everyone knows they don't want him back, so they work with him to show just how much they hate him. And that has made him durable, because how can you truly be erased if the whole franchise is always coming up with new ways to joke about erasing you? So what do you guys think? Do you think Scrappy-Doo deserves a real redemption arc for a new generation that never lived through the backlash? Or do you think the hate has gone on for too long and now people don't see him as a character, but simply hate him and see him as a joke? Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.